A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about walking off a Princess cruise after just 17 hours, losing most of a $3,400 vacation because of an oil spill delay, canceled port, and some frustrating compensation tactics. Somehow, that video blew up to over 270,000 views now, and you left thousands of comments. Beyond the jokes about my background plant looking like a bad haircut, one theme kept coming up. That's easy for you to say when you can afford to throw away $3,400. And you're absolutely right. I completely glossed over something crucial in the original. The decision to leave wasn't universally correct. Our situation gave us the privilege to walk away from an expensive vacation with no guarantee of a refund. For many families, a cruise represents years of savings. It's the big trip, maybe a once-in-a-decade thing. When you're in that situation, Princess's compensation offer gets even worse, becoming an illusion of choice that really isn't. Capybaras highlighted this likely scenario. What if those $3,400 were almost all the money you had available to spend on the vacation? What happens then? You're having a crappy cruise, but you can't afford to pivot to a hotel. Leaving the ship means finding more money for restaurants and alternative activities. Flight changes might be super expensive or impossible. You've already burned your vacation days. Even if it's not how you imagined it, staying on the ship at least gives you food, entertainment, and a bed. Psychology matters, but so do these very real constraints. So when I talk about making the right decision for us, I need to be clear. We had options most people didn't have. We lived 90 minutes away, so no flight changes. The staycation pivot meant no hotel needed. We could drive to Buc-ee's, pick up barbecue, and go to a nice dinner on land. That flexibility is a privilege. The original video was about the psychology and decision making, but psychology operates within our constraints. And often, financial limitations remove options. You stay on the subpar cruise. You try to make the best of it. And you blame yourself for every disappointment because Princess gave you the choice to leave even though it really wasn't a choice at all. Frankly, that's what makes the asymmetrical compensation offer even more frustrating. As Raccoon Trash Panda highlighted, you don't have to use the credit if you can't afford another half cruise or don't want to go with the same company again. But imagine you're one of those families. This was your big trip. You saved for years, and Princess offers you the equivalent of Kohl's cash with an expiration date. The fine print required you to book within 6 months and travel within 18 months or lose that value. And remember, this was one of Princess's cheapest cruises at 4 days. To use that voucher, you need to find more money and book another vacation with the company that just let you down. How does that make you feel? While others commented to look on the bright side, in that moment, disappointed by the trip you'd sacrificed to save for, how does it feel to be trapped, needing to make the best of a situation? And receiving future credit, that means you need to dish out even more money you may not have to recover that value. Standing at guest services at 11 p.m., the future cruise credit wasn't part of my mental math at all. There was zero chance I was giving Princess another shot within 18 months. Whether it was 25% or 50%, it had no value to me. But if you couldn't afford another cruise within 18 months, then the offer had no value to you either. By making any offer, they acknowledged the experience failed to meet expectations. Princess transferred the financial burden back to the customer, and for those who this was their splurge, that's a tremendous shame. These families trusted them with their limited leisure money and time, maybe years of savings, and received a potentially unusable voucher trap. Shifting to focus on the psychology topics from the first video, a number of you also challenged whether this was even a valid example of a sunk cost fallacy. That's a fair point. Let me address that because it gets at something deeper about making decisions under pressure. First, let me step back and define sunk cost fallacy. The classic example is a poker game. You're looking at your cards. There's $500 in the pot. 200 of that came from your wallet. Based on everything that's happened so far, this hand looks like a loser. Psychology says ignore the 200 you already bet because it's gone. The only question is, given what you know now, should you stay in or fold? But the sunk cost fallacy makes you keep thinking of that $200 as your money. But the moment it went in the middle, it wasn't. $200 is a sunk cost. There's no partial refunds in poker. No, if you fold now, get 25% in future hand credit. It's just gone. Your decision is binary, hold 'em or fold 'em. Our situation wasn't that clean. Princesses offer complicated things. Stay and get 75% compensation in a mix of refund and credit, or leave and get 25% all in credit. That's not pure sunk cost in the financial sense because our choice affected the outcome. We could get some of our money back, and the amount varied based on what we did next. So technically, it's not a textbook sunk cost example. But when we think about the mental traps that the fallacy illustrates, it goes way beyond money. We obsess over the financial side because money is easy to measure. But there are a lot of other sunk costs. Time can be a sunk cost. The 17 hours we'd already spent on the cruise was gone. We weren't getting day one back no matter what we chose. The time to plan, pack, drive there, parking, all gone. They were already in the middle of the poker table. Expectations are a sunk cost. We built this trip up mentally. My parents love cruising. We'd been planning this for months. This was our triumphant return to the seas after nearly a decade since their big 40th anniversary trip. Emotions are a sunk cost. The disappointment and stress we'd already experienced, that wasn't refundable either. No amount of compensation would refund my feelings of standing at guest services, watching them dismiss concerns, growing increasingly frustrated, seeing the corporate trap that was being laid for us and for everyone else on board. While hard to plug into a spreadsheet, those costs often matter more than money. When I was sitting in the ship's library at 11 p.m. with my family, trying to decide, it was those sunk costs stressing me out. The financial answer was obvious. Only an idiot would walk away. The reason we even considered leaving was because of all those other sunk costs piling up. The emotional exhaustion, the uncertainty about whether we'd actually leave port, the dread of spending the next 3 days managing disappointment, risking growing more frustrated by not being able to get past the first day's annoyances. So yeah, this wasn't pure sunk cost fallacy, but it was something arguably more important, a test of what you're actually willing to keep paying, not just in dollars, but in time, emotion, and well-being. And how does that impact your vacation happiness, which was the point of the whole thing to begin with? Which brings me back to a better framework for what we were actually doing: regret minimization. This is a Jeff Bezos thing, going back to his decision to start selling books online before he became a nominee for billionaire most likely to become a real-life Bond villain. He had a really good, high-paying job. He went to resign, and his boss told him to think it over before he did something he might regret. So Bezos did. He determined that looking back on this moment when he was 80 years old, he'd regret not taking his shot at entrepreneurship far more than he would walking away from good money and a stable career. So I just finished reading Daniel Pink's The Power of Regret, and I took away a different way to think about our decision. Sitting there with my family, the only choice we had to make in that moment was stay or leave. Focusing on regret, we'd eventually find ourselves with two ideas in our head: at least and if only. Whatever happened next, if we stayed on board, at some point we'd think, if only we'd gotten off the ship. Then we wouldn't have to deal with whatever new annoyances came up. We'd also likely have our glass half full moments thinking, at least we got this afternoon together. What if my parents' anniversary dinner was another disappointment? We could think, oh, if only we'd have gotten off the ship. I could have taken them to Perry's Steakhouse for pork chops for the same price effectively as this specialty dinner. I could also think, at least we got to celebrate their anniversary together. You might be yelling at your screen right now thinking, yeah, exactly, be optimistic. Look on the bright side. I try to be a pretty positive person, but it's also unrealistic and frankly unhealthy to always be positive, especially when facing disappointment. We need to weigh the if only regrets and the at least silver linings to consider our emotions. It's the sum of these possibilities that impacts happiness, which is the whole point of vacation. We can do the same analysis regarding leaving. At least we got off the ship. We could have been having a way worse time together, plus be stuck in the middle of the ocean. And then, if only we had stayed, maybe day 2 or 3 wouldn't have been as bad as day 1. Imagining those future scenarios becomes the emotional basis for making the best decision for us. Which brings us back to Bezos. Which option do we regret less? Given our ability to walk off, get in our car, drive away, and take control, with me already formulating a plan of how to make the most of our time together, it became the correct decision in that moment. We don't get much time with my parents, and my wife used the last of her vacation time to take these few days off. We didn't have the complexity of changing flights, finding hotels at midnight, or scrambling to fill 3 days with no plan. For others on the ship, that calculation was completely different. And that's okay. Different constraints equal different right answers. Two people can be in the exact same situation, making opposite choices, and both be absolutely correct. Now, many of you asked, what actually happened to the ship? Before I give you the status update, let me bring in another decision-making expert on why that doesn't matter. Annie Duke's a pro poker player with a PhD in psychology. She teaches decision-making using actual poker hands she's played. She walks through every detail: her cards, her opponent's behavior, pot size, chip stacks, the math, the odds, everything that went into her choice. And then, totally annoying her audience, she never reveals the outcome. You never know what the final cards were. Her lectures are like the series finale of The Sopranos. Her reason is that we can't let results bias our evaluation of the decisions. I'll be less annoying and share that the ship did leave around noon on day 2. Based on the comments, some passengers who stayed had a great time. Others were disappointed. It goes to show how subjective experiences are. But sitting there at 11 p.m., all we could do was make the best decision with the information available. We had a midnight deadline. Per the captain's announcement, Cozumel was canceled, departure was uncertain, and the aspects of the trip that we valued most, food and service, had failed to meet expectations on day 1. Could it have gotten better? Sure. Could it have continued to suck? Absolutely. We based our decision on what we knew at the moment. And reading reviews afterwards changes nothing about whether we made the right call. What if we'd have left and had a terrible fight with my parents? Yeah, that would have sucked, but it wouldn't have meant staying was the right choice. What if we'd stayed and day 2 was amazing? Great for the people who stayed, but it wouldn't have meant we should have stayed because we didn't know what would happen when we decided. You evaluate the decision based on what you know then, not what you learn later. A lot of you also ask, did you have travel insurance? Are you suing? What happened with the refund? We'll do a rapid fire in this part. First, on insurance. Yes, we had coverage through Chase Sapphire Reserve. It was standard trip cancellation, interruption, and medical emergency protection. It's solid coverage, especially for what it costs. The problem, this situation didn't qualify. Travel insurance typically covers things like trip cancellation before you leave, trip interruption due to medical emergency or death, or complete cancellation by the cruise line before departure. What it doesn't usually cover is, I boarded a ship, the trip was lousy, and I chose to leave early because of poor service and itinerary changes. The fact we could even walk off a cruise in day 2 was never a scenario I would have imagined. Could a really robust, expensive, cancel for any reason policy have covered it? Maybe. Those policies exist, they're just expensive, have a lot of restrictions, and would still require fighting with the insurance company over whether Princess calling the oil spill beyond their control voids the coverage in any way. So, for most people in this situation, travel insurance wasn't the magical solution. We're pursuing the lower effort option, disputing the charge directly through our credit card company. As I'm sure you'd guess if you're this far into video 2, I submitted extensive documentation on the whole ordeal. Princess is pushing back. So where does it stand right now? It's still pending. The process is slow. Maybe we get some money back, maybe we get nothing. At least I know that more than 250,000 people are aware of the situation, which is frankly worth a lot more in emotional well-being. If there's anything interesting to report when it resolves, maybe that becomes episode 3. Several of you also suggested class action lawsuit, sue them, take them to court. While I appreciate your outrage, the reality is going the legal route introduces a whole new layer of potential sunk costs, financial, emotional, and temporal. Finding a lawyer, figuring out jurisdiction, and getting past a detailed cruise contract, all of which are much more draining than letting the credit card company handle it. And that's likely what many companies bank on. The cost of fighting them in time, money, and sanity exceeds what most people are willing to pay. For us, the credit card dispute felt like the right balance. Some effort, some documentation, but not all-consuming of my life. So, if insurance won't help, disputes are slow, and lawsuits are their own nightmare, what's left? A number of you suggested an alternative retribution approach, strategic gluttony. Staying on board and eating and drinking everything that isn't tied down to teach Princess a lesson. Turn your vacation into a revenge mission. Make them feel your wrath at the buffet. Establishing your dominion like Jabba the Hutt, loading up plate after plate with the highest price per pound option you can find, staring down the lens of the nearest security camera, meat sweats clearly evident, declaratively asserting, "You want ancillary revenue? Here's your ancillary revenue." But the question is, will the cruise line even care? There's no hidden camera or scale as you walk off the ship with the accountant behind the scenes, Mr. Burns style, steepling his fingers going, "Excellent, we got that one," or shaking his fist at the buffet champion screaming, "Curse you, you efficient eaters." You're not making the quarterly earnings call. The CFO isn't going to stand at the podium and say, "This quarter would have been solid, but Lori Tanner really took it to us. That woman ate her weight in crab legs. We're financially ruined." Across more than 10 million passengers annually sailing on Carnival ships, you're a blip. They're playing the law of averages, and the house wins, even at the buffet. So I'll admit, growing up Midwestern, I was a proud member of the Clean Plate Club. I saw all-you-can-eat restaurants like Joey Chestnut Approach's Hot Dogs. They were a contest to win. Load up on shrimp, bacon, whatever's expensive. Skip the salad, that's the sucker's game. Now, as an overweight guy in his 40s, I'm living the real cost of decades spent getting my money's worth. Nick Offerman makes a great Carnival spokesperson, as Ron Swanson once said in Parks and Rec.
"Just give me all the bacon and eggs you have." Wait. I worry what you just heard was, "Give me a lot of bacon and eggs." What I said was, "Give me all the bacon and eggs you have."
If that's what floats your boat, to take out your frustrations on the buffet, your stomach, and the cruise ship's plumbing, more power to you. But for us, vacation is meant to be an escape from everyday reality. For my wife and me, we've shifted from quantity to quality. We'd rather have one incredible dinner at Perry's Steakhouse, where my mom legitimately had the best pork chop of her life, than risk 3 more days of dinners of questionable quality. And to respond to another comment, no, Perry's hasn't sponsored these videos, but I am willing to take their call. What still matters most is answering the question, what actually brings you happiness on vacation? To everyone who shared their stories, like Top Gun NY3HE's story about their mom and Rambling Ryan's perspective on hardship, thank you. You reminded me how personal and varied these decisions really are, and how broadly these concepts apply, particularly to way more important things than a vacation. And to those of you who challenged my blind spots on privilege and sunk cost, you were right. You made this a better follow-up. The first video blew way beyond any expectation when I reluctantly shared it a few weeks ago. I'm so grateful for everyone who commented, and especially to those who subscribed. If these frameworks resonate, regret minimization, if only, at least, or just the reminder that vacation happiness is the goal, consider hitting the like button and subscribe for more stories and psych breakdowns. Or maybe share with someone who might benefit. I'd love to read your comments on your own decision-making regrets or what I got wrong again. I'm currently working on a book about mid-career pivots and decision-making, and I'm planning new videos here and early chapters coming to Substack in January if you want a deeper dive. But for now, thanks again for sharing your time with me. Make the best decisions for you today. Cheers.